Hey everybody, this is Lenny Kiser, and today I'm going to be showing you a couple of different techniques for creating big kick drums. Creating big kick drums is all about proper layering, sample selection, processing, and then tuning. Here's the different ways that we're going to do it. Way number one is 2 samples layered together. Way number 2 is using the drum synth kick from Max for Live. Way number 3 is going to be using Operator. And way number 4 is going to be using a handy little plugin known as Bassism. So let's start from scratch here. The first thing you're going to need to do is to load in a blank drum rack. Second thing you're going to want to do is find your top kick. When you're looking for that, you want to look for something that's going to have some top end to it, something that you'll be able to hear on a laptop, something that gives it a little sonic character and color. I'm going to use this Kick Arcade 1 and drag it to my first drum rack pad there. Now, I'm going to go through and look for my sub kick. In this case, I'm looking for something that has a little more low end. Something like that. If you hold Command while dragging the sample onto the same drum rack pad, it will now place them inside of an instrument rack inside of the drum rack itself. This is super handy because now we can create one MIDI clip and one MIDI note to control both samples. And let's go ahead and rename this kick. Perfect. We want to have one be the top kick, which we should relabel this top kick, and bottom kick. Now what we're going to want to do is sweep out some of the low end from the top kick so that it's not fighting with the bottom kick. And the way that I'm going to do this is using the filter in the simpler on the sample. So we need to change that to high pass 24, take the resonance all the way down. And the technique I use for doing this is to take the frequency, have it all the way up so it's cutting all of the low frequencies, and then play the sample back and drag it to where I hear where it sounds good, where they both match up. Now if I go too far and I hear that the samples start to fight a little bit, then I know to pull my frequency knob back up. Okay, so now that we've layered our 2 samples together and we've filtered out the low end from the top kick, let's go ahead and add some processing to glue these sounds together. So I'm going to go up to Audio Effects and add a compressor. Now I like ratios between 4:1 to 10:1 for compressing kick drums. And the reason, again, we're doing this is so that we can glue the 2 kick drums together and make them feel like one. So let's change this to 8. And I'm going to lower my threshold to where I start to see a little bit of gain reduction here. I'm going to turn output down just a little bit. In terms of setting the attack time, this is going to be fairly important because we don't want to squish the transient or the attack stage too much of the kick drum, otherwise it'll dull it out. So I usually start with this fairly slow. I've found ranges between 1 millisecond and 10 milliseconds really good for kick drums. So I'll pull it all the way slow and then dial it back to where I start to see a little bit of gain reduction. You'll know you've gone too far if your kick drum starts to kind of dull out a little bit. So I think right around 4.16, it's the most punchy. From there, I like to add a little bit of saturation. And what this is going to do is it's going to add a little bit of warmth and subtle kind of overdrive and grit to the sound. But it can also be very extreme. Let's start by adding a little bit of drive. Now you can see even just adding a little bit adds a nice feel to the kick drum and kind of helps to glue it together. If you want to go really extreme, you can select hard curve. I like to select both devices by holding Shift and group them into an audio effect rack by hitting Command G. And the main reason I do this is so that I can A/B the before and after process signal. Now in technique number 2, we're going to use that same top kick, but we're going to use a synthesized sub kick. So I'm going to deactivate my bottom kick, and I'm still working in the same drum rack. And I'm going to go up to Max for Live and choose the Max instrument and go down and find the drum synth kick and grab the preset fat analog kick. And I'm just going to drag this into the chains list. So now it's layered with that top kick. Now the hugest benefit to having the drum synth kick is the ability to control the pitch of it and a lot of the other envelope parameters. So we can really have a lot of control over how long the kick sustains, what pitch it's playing, so we can tune our kick to the key of our song. And there's a lot of other really interesting things such as the noise section and the pitch envelope. So let's have a listen and dial it in. So you can see I adjusted the pitch of our sub kick. And if I wanted to shorten or lengthen the kick, I can do that with the decay. If I wanted to roll off some of the attack, so if I want the top kick to have more of the attack stage, I can do that also in the drum synth kick. So you can hear when taking the attack time on the sub kick back, it allows the top kick to come through a lot more, and now that sub kick is acting as the sustain and the release stage a lot more. So now let's move on to another technique and use operator to create that sub kick for us. So I'm going to deactivate my drum synth kick here. I'm going to go up to drums and I'm going to search sine kick. I'm going to drop that into my chains list, and now I have an instance of operator producing a sine wave to create that sub kick for me. I have some of the similar controls. I have attack if I want to roll off some of the attack stage of this sub kick. And you'll notice when I do that, you really start to hear that top kick come through. So this is important to adjust and listen to where it sounds good to you. Then there's the decay time again, which will control the length of our sub kick. And the tuning knob, so we can tune it to the key of our song. Another handy trick to use is to drop an EQ8 into our chain here and flip open the frequency display. And now when we're tuning, because unlike the drum synth, which tells us which note or which pitch it's actually playing, operator just has a general tuning knob here. So we can actually look using the frequency display here and see what note it's playing. If I hover my mouse over the fundamental of where the kick transient is, I can now see that that note is playing 54.8 hertz or A0. So this is really beneficial if you say your track's in D, we can tune up to that. Okay, so let's move on to the final method, which is using bassism to create that sub kick. So I'm going to go into plugins and go over to my chains list and drop bassism on there. Deactivate my sine kick. Bassism is a particularly interesting little synth too for generating a sub kick. Some of the really important sections are being able to choose what the fundamental frequency is and its associated pitch. Again, we can choose the length of it. We can also determine the start frequency of the kick sample. And now in the newest version, they actually added a noise section, which is handy if you want to add a little bit of noise to your kick drum so it's not quite so clean. So change this to high pass and turn the volume up a little bit. To get a little more creative, who's to say we can't layer a different sample, such as a hi-hat or maybe a tom drum, on top of our kick to make it a little more interesting and have a little bit more character. So I'm going to go up to the browser, go to my samples folder, and find a tom drum, drag that into my chains list. And again, I'm going to turn my filter on in the simpler, change that to high pass 24, and sweep it down to cut out some of the low frequencies. And I highly encourage you to get really creative with this and layer any type of sample that you can think of on top of your kick drums to make them a little more interesting. And there you go. I hope you found this really useful, and I hope you go and make some really awesome sounding kick drums.